that story was inspired by the song American Girl, which is why it's titled American Girl. Um, and that song was, really popular when I was in high school and coming of age. And yeah, I was just out with friends at a bar in Pennsylvania. We were at this small town in Pennsylvania, um, and the town, it was a really small town. So the bar had, there were teenage girls all, decked out in their midriff shirts and mascara and lipstick, and, and then these biker dudes, and they were all flirting. And then at the other end of the bar were these sort of, the women on the other end of that, love, lust, marriage, babies. They were, probably their girls were probably, their daughters were probably in that pack of girls. And they were just like hanging out, listening to the music. And I, and I was just thinking about the spectrum of a woman's life, from this, this feeling that, you have everything ahead of you and love is everything. And possibilities are endless. And then sort of the realities of life, not good or bad, but just the reality of life, right? Some of your dreams are going to die. Some of them are going to be dreams you never thought you would have, that come to you later when you start to mature. And you can't predict anything. You can't really control very much either. So I started really thinking about just that concept. And that's where the character was born. And she didn't start out to be anything except who she was. Like, so I knew I needed her to be very perceptive about the people around her, because she, again, it gets back to structure. She is our storyteller. We see everything through her eyes. I did not want to have other points of view in this story. And so she has to be able to really understand these grown-ups, what motivates them, what they must be feeling from their situation. She has to have empathy for people who have hurt her, for people who aren't particularly nice to her. And teenagers don't have those skills, right? They just don't. And so I started thinking about, why would she have these skills? And one of the things I thought of was, maybe she'd been through childhood trauma. That, that's the first thing that came to mind, was, okay, if she'd had trauma, she would have had to have learned all of these skills to survive. But I didn't want to give her that kind of backstory. I didn't want to bog the story down with backstory, explaining why she has these abilities. So I just started writing her. And it was actually, my editors who identified that I was writing an autistic teenage girl. And in my mind, she just had these skills. I knew she was neurodivergent, but I hadn't put a label on it. And I also think, as a writer, who's not autistic and not, I think I do have some OCD, and I have some of the mannerisms that Charlie has are mine. I actually just borrowed from myself when I was a teenage girl. And then I amped it up. I gave her, more insightful skills than I had. But then I did a deep dive into autism, into neurodivergent, young teenage girls, and understanding the skills that they have. And they're so diverse. That's the other thing, is that the wonderful narrator for the book, which was an Audible original first, and is coming to print now in October, and I'm so happy about that. Paige Lale is an autism advocate and educator and social media influencer. And Audible actually trained her to be an audio performer for this book. And she and some sensitivity readers were extremely helpful in fine-tuning Charlie, so that we could actually say that she's autistic, and have that be a part of the story. But the most important thing that I learned when I was researching autism is this expression that is used, which is, if you know one autistic person, you know one autistic person. And that's because it is every just like everyone else, their neurology is unique to them. And so, the category of neurodivergent encompasses such a wide variety of skill sets that are built to create sort of a fulfilling life. That it was actually very easy to write her because she just is Charlie Hudson. She's not modeled after anybody. But yes, the skills that she has are consistent with a neurodivergent teenager. As a mother too, raising 3 sons, and now they're, all of them are in college or beyond, and looking back at how different they were, how differently they process information from themselves and from me. And also, my work in family law, seeing how different people would interpret things and be able to handle things and process things, and studying why that is and what goes on in an individual brain. And really so much of it is understanding yourself and how your thoughts are processed. And again, the interplay between the processing, the thinking processing and the emotional processing, and how they interact is really useful too in writing a character like Charlie, because her emotions, are triggered by thoughts, and the thoughts are not necessarily accurate, her perceptions, just like anyone else's. And so, yeah, it was really fun to write her, to write a story through the eyes of a 17-year-old. There's an innocence there that I don't usually get to explore when I'm writing a first person point of view. And it's sort of an innocence and she has a lot of wisdom for her age, but she still also has a lot of naivete and expectations and hopes and dreams and all of those things. And being able to explore all of these characters through her eyes was really, really fun. This story began with a real life event. I was listening to the news, and I heard witness accounts from a shooting in Colorado, and they had just come out of this grocery store. And I remember thinking, that their stories disappeared really quickly when there were, other people to interview, families of the victims, people who had been injured, the first responders and all of that. And these people just, went off into the world, and we never heard about them again. And I thought, what happens to them? What does that do? What would that do psychologically to a person to be placed in that kind of acute traumatic situation? And I wanted to explore that. Usually in my books, I start with a character who has already been traumatized, either in childhood or throughout, throughout a large portion of their lives. So we already meet them. We meet them already in a compromised situation. And so then it's a new situation, and we get to see how they process it and the things that they do. Even Molly Clark in Don't Look for Me, who, when she has this little momentary break, she'd had a horrible, she lost a child. Her marriage was failing. Her kids were spinning out of control. So she, I put her through a lot of trauma before we meet her. But at least we experience the trauma with her. She's going about her life. She's a cop. She happens to be in this department store off duty, buying towels for her daughters when she hears these shots, and she ends up, inserting herself in the situation as a law enforcement officer, and taking one life to save another. And sorry, my battery. Sorry about that. Okay, I'll start again. Oh, you got it. Okay. And so that is the trauma. So the trauma is the beginning of the book. And doing that was really, it allowed me to bring the reader along for that ride. What happens to a person after something like that happens? And then to put Wade through the same thing on the other side. And so they both are reeling from psychological fallout from this event. For Elise, she has extreme guilt and grief from wondering if she needed to take this person's life. And she has the added trauma of having been in this terrifying, life-threatening situation. And what that does, and this is so, again, when you start doing a deep dive into psychology, there's always so much there to explore and write about. But what I found most poignant about the research was that people who are not physically injured, but still have experienced the trauma, the people around them, their loved ones, and the public at large think they should feel grateful that they got out unscathed, and you should now see life through these rose-colored glasses, like everything is brighter and lighter and more wonderful because you know what you almost lost. But the reality is very different. There's a whole chain of things that they have to go through to recover from that shock to their emotional brain. And again, it goes back to the interplay between emotional memory and our emotions that are triggered, and our thinking brain that processes things. Those two things have to be reconciled in the recovery of trauma to put it in its right place. Because the reality is that we know that anything can happen to us at any day, right? A tree could fall on us. We could get, there could be a flood, there could be a fire, we could be in a car accident. And honestly, these days, it's extremely prevalent. Gun violence is very prevalent. It's not a political statement. Everyone agrees on all sides of the issue that it is prevalent and too prevalent. So we know these things can happen, but if we thought about them every minute of our day, we would never function. We wouldn't be able to get through grocery shopping, school, work, if we were constantly thinking about the perils that are around us. So we don't. Our minds put them in a place somewhere else where we don't think about them every day. But when one of them happens to you and you make it out alive, it's a different process inside your brain. It now is saying, oh, no, we can't keep this off in the corner. We need to keep this front and center. We need to think about this every day because it did happen, not just could happen, it did. And now we know what it feels like for that to happen. And that response, there's a process that has to happen to be able to put that memory and those feelings again to the side so you can get on with life. But the people around you don't know that you need to do that. They think you should just go back to being normal, but maybe even being happier than you were. And that disconnect creates loneliness and isolation, because we never want to feel that we're not understood by the people that we love and who love us. We want them to know and to see us, but we don't want to disappoint them either. So we don't want to say, actually, no, I'm not happier. I'm in agony, emotional agony, and my anxiety is like through the roof, and I can't sleep and I can't focus. So Elise, that's what she goes through. So she becomes isolated from her husband, her partner, and she feels detached from her entire life. On the other hand is Wade. He goes in there already emotionally compromised. His behavior is really not great. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but the way he reacts in that situation exposes a part of himself that's really unpleasant to look at. And so he has an emotional break, but he also has what they call it rescue worship with Elise. So that's why he becomes obsessed with her. So he's psychotic and obsessed with Elise because of what happened in that store, the trauma that he shared with her. And rescue worship is so fascinating because it's the same dynamic, right? Of coming to see these events as not just possible things, but things that actually do happen and have happened. And one way that people process that and deal with it is when they are rescued by one person, is to have rescue worship. And they believe that they were destined to meet this person, and that this event happened so they could meet this person. That then puts this horrible event into a box of meant to be, destiny, however preordained by God, by fate, by the universe, whatever your belief system is. And by putting it in this box of, oh yeah, this was meant to be, that alleviates this feeling that it could happen again. It's not going to happen again because it already happened, and it happened for a reason. It happened for me to meet my rescuer. And so the obsession with the rescuer becomes essential to keeping this event in this box off in the corner so you can go about life. So it's so fascinating, right? When you do a deep dive into trauma recovery and all of this psychological, sort of the psychological aftermath of of experiencing a trauma like this.
Why did What Remains feel like the right title, and as an example of how your titling process works?
Yeah. So What Remains was the immediate thing that came to my mind when I was thinking about these witnesses to this shooting in Colorado. I thought, what remains of them? What is left of them? What is going on in their brains, in their in their lives when they go back and are supposed to just carry on after experiencing something like that? It's a severe trauma, and I think the title just flowed right from that initial thought about what this story would be. In October, American Girl will be in print for the first time. So that will be available in hardcover and paperback and digital, and it's already available in audio. And I'm really excited about that. Then in 2024, I did another Audible piece called Mad Love, which is so much fun. It's a fully scripted audio play. So imagine if you were watching your favorite TV show, but with your eyes closed, and where everything could be absorbed and told through the dialogue and the sound effects. So it will sound like an old-fashioned radio play, full cast of characters, about 3 hours long, sound effects, many layers of flashbacks and all sorts of things telling the story. I sort of pitch it as the Tinder swindler meets Dirty John meets me. So it's got, sort of the hallmarks of my structuring and the psychology, but then the driving parts of the story have to do with this sort of Dirty John Tinder swindler character who infiltrates the life of a young wealthy widow and her 2 teenage children. And then, sorry, I have another novel coming out. I have so much stuff going on. I have another novel coming out in 2024 or maybe early 2025 called Kill Me Softly, and that is about a serial killer who's targeting middle-aged women and making it look like suicide. And that is a little bit of a social commentary on how we value and view women over a certain age and how they view themselves as a result. But it's also another fast-paced thriller, and it has 4 points of view. So that was really fun to write.
Ambitious. What was different about writing a 4 POV story from?
Oh my gosh, it was so fast because some of the things that slow me down writing is having, when you've already placed a character in a certain family setting or in their home and described it, and then you have a whole chapter to fill, and I have certain things that I want to happen or facts that need to be disclosed, but the other things supporting that chapter and those facts and disclosures have already been told. So you already know this character, you already know where she lives, you already know her family, you already know her backstory. And so you can, it's sort of, okay, how much more should I tell and how much more scaffolding do I need? But when you're switching points of view, four times in like a given segment, you're like, oh, I haven't talked about her boyfriend. I haven't talked about this. I haven't talked about her mother. I so much stuff. And I found that really, really made the writing process much faster because there wasn't as much page space for each point of view. And so you have all this information and less page space. And so it was easy to kind of build the structure around each chapter.